Hello, welcome to Game Dev London. I'm Chris Payne, and today my guest is not from video games. We have Matt Pennington of Profound Decisions, which is who run one of the UK's largest Fest LARP events. So, first off, welcome to the podcast, Matt.
Hi, thanks
And
for having
I
me on.
just wanted to kick off with what can you? Our audience is primarily video game developers, so can you summarise what live role
Mm.
play is for people who are maybe not so familiar with it?
Yeah, sure. An old friend of mine once, years ago, once tried to persuade me to drop the phrase live role playing and call it real life gaming. It's kind of like it's just like any other role online gaming. Particularly the more social ones. I think there's quite a lot of similarities between what we do and Eve in some respects, weirdly, although ours is fantasy, not spaceships. But it's essentially a massive, persistent world, but it only operates for 4 weekends a year, and it's all done live. There's no technology. People just turn up, get dressed up in costume, and then they play their part and they act out their part fully as the person they are, rather than through a computer. It's not that
So,
dissimilar.
obviously, that presents a massive amount of logistical challenges in terms of supporting like thousands of people in a field for a weekend. But I wanted to focus on the design issues because this is not your first Fest LARP, is it? I believe, was Maelstrom your first one? Oh, okay,
No, we did the first game yeah, the first game I designed. No, the first game I was in a group that designed. Let's be clear about that. There were six of us designed a game called
right.
Omega LRP. No, the group's called Omega, and the game was called Phoenix. It was a kind of rise from the ashes motif, and that was a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, and that ran for 5 years. Started with 200 players, finished with about 450, 500, which seems tiny to me now, but was big at the time. Um, and yeah, that ran for 5 years, twice a year. But that wasn't as a
Yeah,
job. That was just as a hobby. And it just got so
yeah,
big, it kept getting bigger and bigger. And I kind of thought, right, I can't do this as a hobby. I've either got to quit my hobby or quit my job. And I was a database programmer at the time. So I thought, sod it, I'll throw in my job and do this full time. So we set Profound Decisions up. And then the first game we launched with
right.
Profound Decisions was Maelstrom, which was a sort of Renaissance discovery of a new world. It was like Columbus goes to a fantasy America with strange alien species and bug creatures and snake people and stuff. And that ran for 9 years before that game came to an end. And in the
Hmm.
meantime, we then ran Odyssey, which was a sort of classical era Greco-Roman swords and sandals game. And now we run Empire, which I don't even know how you describe it really. It's very traditional fantasy in some senses, although it does have a completely novel setting. But it's kind of that core medieval fantasy vibe, that sort of 12th, 13th century that you'll see in most D&D settings and most tabletops role-playing settings. Um, yeah, but
Yeah,
it's a game of war and politics. That's what it is. It's a game of
yeah.
war and
I was going to
politics.
say uh, obviously I didn't personally play Maelstrom or Odyssey, but I believe that the distinctive feature of Empire is the kind of like the Risk board game back end to the whole play experience. Um, did Odyssey or Maelstrom have that level of uh, metagame behind the event?
Maelstrom had a much more
Right.
complicated metagame behind it, vastly more complicated. I built an entire kind of database engine where every character could have like units of fish and move them around the map, and unbelievably pointless in hindsight level of detail. Um, and
Mm.
the weakness of that approach was it took too much away from the live game, and there was too much emphasis on the actual
Right.
computer simulation. What Odyssey showed us when we developed Odyssey was that all you really needed was a very, very simple model for the world to change state in response to what the players did, but you could have all those decisions happen at the event. And so Empire really took that and took it to the next level. So yeah, it has a really simple risk style board game for the war element of it. But all the key decisions are taken at the event. All the generals decide where their armies are going. All the political decisions, everything, all the economic decisions are made at the event. And then all we do between the events is just sort of roll things forward to the next state. And that was a very conscious design decision to try and keep that focus on the
Yeah.
actual live
I
experience.
remember being very excited to come to the first Empire event, knowing that it was a brand new Fest event, and looking at all of the
Mm.
design ideas that had gone into it. What was it like building not just the mechanics for a whole new Fest LARP, but also like a world that could potentially sort of like carry like the world's the backstory is necessary, but then also you have to have a roadmap for the future of the empire over maybe like 9, 10, 20 years of play.
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, we sketched out 10 or 20 years of play. We sort of said, right, well, this could happen and we'll put this thing here. There's effectively DLC that we could bring online into the game 5 or 10 years
Yeah,
in if we needed to, if the sort of we'd exhausted the play options of what we're doing. But I think the one advantage that live role playing has in comparison with kind of online gaming is there is still a significant level of hand moderation to what we're doing. The core elements, we write new storylines for every event. We create new
yeah,
news and new events for every event. And so actually we are barely scratched the surface of the material that we sketched out when we started the game. We sketched out 10 years of material, and I look at it and think, yeah, we've got 10 years of material now. I don't look at it and think, oh yeah, we're halfway through after 9 years. I think
yeah,
we're about 10% of the way through after 9 years. So the with good writing, it's a bit like, I guess the argument's a bit like sort of Game of Thrones, that classic season 7 that everybody loathed because suddenly there was an accelerator button and nobody could understand why. They'd taken
yeah,
years to craft a story and they clearly had a sense of where they're going, but actually you can take as long over the
yeah.
storytelling as you like. And that, in a sense, is what we're doing. We're taking as long over the storytelling as we like. So, yeah, we've got loads of material sketched out, but don't feel in any rush to
Yeah, I
get
mean,
to
a
it.
lot of the players just turn up just to live in the empire and don't necessarily engage with the ongoing politics and so on. They just enjoy hanging out with friends and basically fancy dress drinking.
Yeah. Yeah, we were really clear when we created Empire that there were lots of different things that people wanted out of LARP, and some things we can't give them. That LARP is like computer games.
Hmm.
LARP is a medium. It's first person shooters are very different to RTS or whatever, and different live role playing games can be every bit as different as that. So we had a clear sense of what we wanted to deliver, but we did want to provide, at the end of the day, we're a company
Yeah,
and we wanted lots of people to come. So we thought about, well, what are all the different kinds of LARPer and what do they want out of the game? And one of the things we were really clear about was we wanted a world you could live in that felt real. It could just exist in and enjoy being in it and living in that world. And some people, you look at things like the Navarre Song and Story, and it's just an extraordinary moment where people come together and celebrate these festivities and the festivals as their characters and just live in the world. And we didn't do anything to make that happen other than give them a world that was
yeah,
believable
yeah.
to be in.
So, what's it like having to generate unique content like 4 times a year? Because that that treadmill must be pretty unrelenting.
Yeah, it is pretty tough. I mean, I don't get a lot of time off in the season. I get plenty of time off over winter because our cycle, because live role playing happens broadly during the good months of the year. We start sort of end of spring and finish mid autumn. Um, but it's relentless. There's a 7 week, 6, 7 week cycle, and you've got 4 weeks of that will be spent solid writing, creating new content. We basically create what we call Winds of Fortune, which are major news events for the world, which introduce new problems for the players to solve in what effectively is like a massive wide game. You get hundreds, thousands of players going to come together and collaborate to solve those problems or to decide what the solution is. But we're effectively creating all of those, and yeah, it's quite punishing. Yeah,
Yeah.
in season it's tough. I won't deny that.
Yeah.
It's long,
So
long
because
hours, but
you create not only
it's
the Winds of War and the Winds of Fortune that update the players on the large scale state of the world, but you also prepare a certain amount of like micro content. So, for example, past life visions. The setting has a
yep.
kind of reincarnation as a central tenet of the state religion, and individual players can get a personalized experience if they can scrape together sufficient funds to do it, basically. So that that level of preparation for to create plot for individual players who have been sort of like helped towards that plot by their friends within the game is must be quite difficult. I know that you can throttle that by limiting the resource that allows past life visions, so that only a couple of players per event can actually have that experience, which keeps it special.
Yes. Yeah, we call them levers. Effectively, you can pull a lever to get an experience of some kind, or to get a plot, or to make
Mm-hmm.
plot happen, or to cause something to happen in the game. But of course, our ability to respond is limited. We've only got X amount of bandwidth. So the trick is only to put that many levers into the game. And obviously each lever only works once. But that intrinsically creates games. Then people argue and fight over who will get access to those levers. Um, so the plot is really important at two levels. One is it does create those unique experiences, and it's really good, I think, to be able to balance that sort of wide scale things are happening in the Empire with the personal level of I've just had a past life vision in which I'm actually Cleopatra or whatever. But they also create interactions as people try and discuss over who should pull those levers and what those levers, how those levers should be pulled and what should happen with them, who should get access to them. But the key is to limit the number of opportunities to your bandwidth. And we sort of manage that. Occasionally, we realise we've overshot and promised too much. But I have a whole team of
Mm-hmm.
writers for that. We have a lot of volunteers who basically are really into producing those kind of unique, tailored experiences. And so my job and Raf's job, who isn't here today, sadly, who's my kind of head of plot, his job is just to sort of quality control, edit, consistency check, and check the things they're writing are sort of
Yeah.
consistent with the wider setting. But that largely runs itself. There's just a team of people who
I was
create
going to
all
say,
that
with
content.
regard to volunteers as well, you have a fairly unique approach to large scale battles as well. Because the classic FESLARP approach is to take the player base, divide them into separate nations, and then pit them against each other so that they can have a big fight. You've taken a different approach for Empire.
We have, although, be fair, there are two models. There is one which is what we
Yeah.
call PvP, which is the one you've just described, where you split everyone up into factions and they all fight each other. And the problem, of course, is if you've got 1,000 people who want to fight, how on earth are you going to give them 1,000 people to fight against? And the simple answer is to just divide them in half, and 500 people fight 500. But the other model, as their characters, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
they fight each other as their characters. The other model that is used, CP uses it, and I think one of the big German fests uses it. Could be wrong about the German fest. Is that you simply ask everyone to volunteer to just give up 2 hours of the event to play the bad guys for the other half of the game. With the understanding that on the other day of the event, that other half of the game will give up 2 hours to provide the bad guys for you. So effectively, we get 500-600 people to volunteer to play an orc
Yeah.
for 90 minutes, 2 hours, and then sort of 600 players can go out as their characters and do battle with the orc horde. Um, and yeah, that absolutely relies on volunteers. It wouldn't even, in theory, we have 80 full-time skirmish crew who are playing orcs all the way through the event, but we couldn't sustain 400 or 500 crew
No.
full time just playing orcs because the A, we couldn't afford it, but B, there wouldn't be enough for them to do. People would have to be fighting them all weekend or they'd be bored. We only need 500 orcs for 2 hours
Yeah.
on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday. So the answer for us was to do that volunteering approach and say, if you play one of the battles, then you have to monster the other one. You volunteer to play a monster on the
It's
other
an
one.
interesting thing because the hobby has, well, it's grown out of a hobby of people just sort of like doing it in their spare time. That people are very
Mm.
used to that social contract of crewing. Even for small scale live role play events, there'll be some events that you go and crew, some events that you play, maybe somewhere you do a bit of both. Um, how has it been trying to sort of like adapt that to a sustainable business model? It's a tricky one because of the level of volunteer work that is absolutely required.
Totally. Our events run with approximately 400 volunteers. We've got 80 playing orcs full time. We've got site crew, admin crew, referees, gate team, traffic team, marshals, toilet team. We have approximately 400 people who come along and give us their weekend for free. And the business would be utterly non-existent, wouldn't function on any level without those people. And that is a strange thing to me. It's still strange to me. Sort of, I've been doing this now nearly 20 years, and it's still strange. I had I mean, it's not that unique. I think a lot of the festivals, like the music festivals, operate a similar model. I think a lot of them use
Mm-hmm.
volunteers for marshals and so forth. But I've never been to a music festival, so I can't say. When I created Profound Decisions and I went from doing it as a hobby to just going, okay, I'm stopping doing it as a hobby. This is my business now. This is full time. I'm going to get paid. And I went out to the hobby and said, hey, I'm setting this new game up. Who's in? And incredible people said, "Yeah, yeah, I'm in. I want to volunteer to help you put this game on." And I was really blown away by that. I can still remember today thinking, like, my God, these people could run their own games. Why are they coming to run a game for me?
Mm.
And that really stuck with me. And I thought a lot about it. And I thought they trust me to deliver a great game. And clearly they want to. They want to come and be part of this. There's something about this that appeals. And I thought a lot about the ethics of how
Mm.
that works. And so we have an unusual situation in that as a company, and I've said this before publicly, we regard the enjoyment of our crew who don't pay for the event as more important than the enjoyment of our players. As a company, our focus is that our crew that's our responsibility is to give our 400 crew a great weekend. Their responsibility is to give 2,000 players a great weekend. And I handpick them because I think, yeah, you're the sort of person I want on my team. You'll
Right.
give people a great weekend. So I don't have to worry about the players because I've got 400 of the best people in the hobby who are well up for delivering an amazing game. But my focus is like those people who come and give me their weekend, I've got to give them an amazing time because this is their holiday. This is their game. This is their fun. And it's my job as the guy who's paid to make their weekend
Mm.
amazing. It's their job to make the players amazing. So, and that's kind of our focus as a company. And I've had
Mm.
criticism for it. If you look at the hobby way back, there was a lot of views that it shouldn't be enjoyable for crew. I've seen people take the view that like the players are the only people important and the crew
That
shouldn't. I don't know. I could explain where that's come from and why it's come from. We don't take that position. We're like, no, no, our crew are our
uh,
first responsibility.
sounds. It's an interesting viewpoint. That it sounds very similar to the viewpoint that kind of like like basic service jobs should not be enjoyable. They should be sort of like low paid and miserable jobs that so that people are motivated to improve themselves and move on to better jobs. There's this argument that there are certain, like working in McDonald's is a job that you pass through on your way to something better, and therefore it shouldn't be satisfying or
Yep.
okay in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's slightly different in live role playing. If you look way back, some of the early models of Fest LRP featured the crew playing big, important, powerful NPCs, and there was a perception that that was their reward, that they
Yeah.
got to be the important character in the weekend, and that created a lot of backlash. And people said, actually, that's a really poor model of LARP, and then that created a kind of viewpoint. Well, people, yeah, they shouldn't enjoy it. The enjoyment should be for the players. And clearly the players should enjoy the weekend. That is what everybody wants. But actually, the healthy model, in my opinion, of where you get there is to say running an event is an amazing experience. The thing I often compare it to, it's a bit like an Amish barn raising. It's a real sense of community. We're all going to come together. We're going to work our ass off, and we're going to put this barn up. And at the end
Yep.
of it, we're all going to be like, "Wow, job well done, guys! Amazing stuff." And that barn is the event that every other 2,000 players enjoy for the weekend. But yeah, I do not subscribe to this view that it shouldn't be enjoyable. And because volunteers, and occasionally I will say to people, if you're not enjoying volunteering, you should not be here. You should not do this. It's not ethical for us as a company to make money out of the hard work of someone who isn't
Yeah.
enjoying what they're doing. It's just not ethical on any level at all. So if you're not enjoying it, please stop.
Yeah. No, that's
Otherwise,
fair.
yeah.
It's interesting to note that, like, where Disney are trying to set up kind of what are effectively live roleplay experiences, they are charging through the
Yep.
nose for that because and it's a much simpler experience than I think Empire provides because it is designed to basically churn customers through so they can all have a satisfactory experience, but there's no continuity or investment on the customer's part. It's just a one shot experience. So it's what are your views on like the commercialization of the hobby in that sense? Do you think Disney are onto a winner with that?
I think it's brilliant. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about the fact that Disney advertises jobs that say LRP experience required. I think Disney are Disney. Disney are the biggest company in the world at being Disney. I remember I took my 3-year-old daughter to was she 3 or 5? Can't remember. We went to Euro Disney, the one in Paris, and I expected to loathe the crass American commercialization and to just be there with my daughter as she got to shake Mickey's hand. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I loved their attention to detail. I loved the way they built this setting. For those who don't know, they move all the Disney figures around the park, but there's only ever one of them at any given time. So you can never meet Mickey in one place and then go another place and meet Mickey
Yeah.
again because that would spoil the illusion. They have an amazing litter system. The moment any litter appears, someone just appears out of nowhere, brushes it up, and disappears again, silently, invisibly. You've got to keep your eyes out. You just won't see it happening because they're trying to create a perfect illusion of this world that you're in. And to me, as a live role player who wants to create an illusionary world for you to live in, I just walk around going, this is just what I do for my day job. This is just me. It's a different kind of LARP. It's the most simplistic live role playing you could ever possibly imagine, but it's mass produced for 1 million
Yeah.
people, 1 billion people, whatever. And I think that's wonderful. I want lots and lots of people to experience LARP. I want them to have that opportunity. And also, I think the profile of the hobby gains. I think we all benefit from the fact that these things are bigger and more seen than they were. I don't think I'm
No.
losing any players to Disney. Let's put it that way. So And for me, when I want to do the things I want to do, to be able to go to a council or the bank and go, yeah, Disney does live role
That
playing. Look, this thing we do is
yeah,
perfectly normal. It's part of an industry. That's all to the good. So, and who knows? Who knows when they're going to discover something amazing? They're going to pioneer some new technology. The strange thing about live role playing is that all the technologies and the ideas are all
yeah.
driven from the grassroots. They're not actually driven by profound decisions or the big companies. The weapons, the costumes, it's all driven by real creatives. But who knows when Disney will develop some VR system that just takes it all to the next level. I'm
That's brilliant.
excited.
What you've just
I'm
said
not.
reminds me,
Yeah.
actually, talking about player creativity, um, how much the look and feel of the game depends on the players. So Empire is a very aspirational system with quite like high costume
Mm.
standards. The event space is divided into in-character camping, which is canvas tents only that might pass as vaguely medieval, and out-of-character camping, sorry, on the other side of the hedge to keep it out of view. So, how's that been? Because there's also this. There are other events that are a lot less picky about costume standards because they are trying to be as open as possible to anybody who wants to give the hobby a try, which is a laudable goal. Personally, I like the high costume standards because it encourages everybody to sort of like constantly improve their kit. Was that a obviously that was a deliberate choice? What was your thinking behind that plan?
So there's two or three aspects to it. The first is, and we saw this really heavily with Odyssey, the classical game we ran. Um, and Odyssey was most people who've done live role playing for any period of time have got a bit of costume for that's vaguely medieval. They've got like a passable tunic or a bit of armor or some weapons. And we said, yeah, we're going to make a brand new game that's set in the classical era with Romans and Greeks. And lots of
Of
people
course.
didn't have any costume for that. And there was an assumption that that would be a big barrier to people. And I do not believe it was. I think the opposite was true. And my argument is that the most difficult nation to costume in
Mm.
that game was the Greeks, because Greek armor is
Oh
what's
yeah.
called a linothorax. It's like it's a really, really unusual piece. Added to that, you want a 7 foot spear and a great big aspis, a big dome shield. Almost
Mm.
no one in LARP had that. And we were asking, and our biggest nation when we launched that game was the Greeks. 150 people went out and went, yeah, I'm going to buy me or make me a linothorax. I'm going to buy a shield and a spear. And actually, the aspirational element of it drew people in. It didn't
Yeah.
create a barrier; it drew people in. So when we came time to do Empire, it wasn't a case of, oh well, will this put people off? Will it be a barrier? Will it mean less people come? We were quite clear it would be the opposite. Now I think it's really important that there is uh, a range of events. There are people who have very little money and whose budgets are heavily constrained. And I think it's really good that there are events they can attend on a very limited budget where the LARP is very much trying to be accessible
Mm-hmm.
financially. And I think that's really important. But actually, what the barrier to entry in LARP is for most people who have not LARPed is not money, it is will I look stupid? That is the barrier that puts most people off. I'm going to dress in a costume. Dressing up is something children do. I'm going to look stupid. And so if you show them pictures of events with very low kit
Yes.
standards, that reinforces that sense of, and when you're there and in the costume, you don't notice it. I've role played for years. My first set of armor was made out of leatherette, which is the stuff they make flooring and sofas out of, and had paper clips through it for studs. It looked every bit as atrocious as it sounds, and I felt amazing, like I was some badass warrior in my armor. Because when you're in the moment, everything is fine. But when you look at the pictures, you look at it and think, oh, it looks a bit naff. What makes the difference for us is being able to show people photos and people go, oh, what movie's that from?
Yeah.
And you go, oh, it's not a movie, it's from our game. Now, not all our photos look that good. You've got to hand pick the very best photos. But nobody, when you pick those best photos, go, yeah, this is our game. People don't go, oh, will I look stupid? They go, can I look that cool? And they're like, yeah, yeah, you can. And we get new players coming in and they're spending hundreds of pounds on their costume for their very first event. And then they're like, oh, I've got to buy an in-character tent as well. And we're like, most live role players play for 10 years before they buy their first tent. You don't need a tent. And they're like, no, 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 that's what the game costs. I'm going to buy a tent. You know, if you're not financially limited, if you're not struggling, then actually the accessibility constraints are very, very different. What it's the barriers to entry are about the perceptions of what you're doing, and is this available to me? Will I look stupid? Will I feel silly? You know, can I imagine myself being in that field with everyone else? And actually, good costume standards make people think, I want to be in that field, and so I think they actually make the game more accessible in a weird way.
Yeah.
And I think the proof of that's in our
Uh,
numbers.
I will have. It's not just the costume, is it though? Because people put an enormous amount of effort into dressing their camps as well in the in character field. So we have like custom made fire pits. We have like there are fiberglass statues that people bring to dress their tents. There's like loads of like banners flapping everywhere. It's an amazing like tent city to be in there. And in fact,
Yeah.
to your point about feeling silly being dressed up, when as time in approaches, I know I for one start to feel very self conscious if I'm not in kit yet, because wearing a t-shirt and jeans
Mhm.
starts to feel really out of place.
Yep. Yeah, totally. No, the things people create for the game are just mind-boggling. You talked about that, Scarlett, who made that statue, that
Yeah,
pair of statues you're talking about. They also made these amazing mosaics, just beautiful handmade mosaics, art. All individual pieces of glass, all sort of cemented into position. For me, as a game organizer, that is just an amazing feeling because I look at it and think, my game inspired you to create that. And that, I just, it's just the greatest compliment as a game organizer you could ever have. You see these, the music people write, the songs they create, the art, the stories, and the attention they go to with the set dressing and the costumes. All of it, hand produced by 2,500, 3,000 participants, and it's just incredible. It is so uplifting to me to think, yeah, I made a world that inspired you to make that, and it's like that. That to me is just amazing. It is just such a compliment. And you're right though, you do feel out of place if you're not. If you're not in costume. I remember being at university and we went to see the Rocky Horror Show, and I thought, I'm not dressing up in stockings and suspenders. I'll feel a right fool. And so I was the only person in the theatre not in stockings and suspenders. And man,
I've
didn't I
I've
feel
been
an
there.
utter idiot. Utter idiot. You know, there's a uniform, and if you're not wearing the same, the accepted, we think of our clothes as normal, and our clothes are normal. But if you change normal, you will be incredibly self-conscious incredibly quickly when you realize that you need to put
Yeah.
your costume on or you don't fit in now. I once had a very amusing, I'll try not to anecdote too much, but a very amusing meeting with the licensing committee for the local council. And they said, well, you've got 1,500 people. How many security people do you have? And I'm like, oh, just one guy. And they're like, well, that's not enough. What do you do if people wander into your event? And I just laughed. I was like, no one wanders into my event. It's like if you wandered in t-shirt and jeans, there'd be 5,000 people, well, it's 1,500 people pointing at you, going, "Who are you? What are you doing here?
Yeah.
And why are you not in costume?" You can't wander in. You have to embrace it. You've got to engage. You've got
Yeah.
to want to be a part of it. It isn't, and that's one of the things that's interesting. It's not something you can
No.
watch. You can't stand on the sidelines in your regular costume and watch it. It's a
Yeah.
participant
Yeah,
only hobby.
that's
Um,
interesting as well. That you restrict photography to the official event photographers uh, as well, which I guess is to help reduce people sort of like breaking character to take photos of cool things, but also to ensure that all of the photographs that come out of the event are top notch. Okay.
it's not quite that restrictive. We do let people take photos, but we have quite, it's significant guidelines
Right.
going like how and when, and we do restrict. We won't let outside photographers come in. I'm always getting requests like, "Oh yeah, I'm a photographer. Here's my gallery. I'd love to come down and photograph the events." And we're like, "Yeah, no, no, not interested." So we never have outside photographers in. You can only photograph if you're at the event and a live role player and in costume. And we have a head of photography, and part of their job is to make sure that people are kind of following a social contract to try and
Mm-hmm.
keep the photography subtle and
Yeah.
discreet, I suppose would be the way to describe it. Because as you say, um, people want to be in the world. They don't want it just. They don't want a
Yeah.
camera thrust in their face. That image of the modern concert where there's the band performing and 3,000 audience members holding up their mobile phones so they could film it. That's not
No.
what we want on any level. Um, yeah, so we do. We put restrictions in place.
So
Um,
let's talk
mm.
about the pandemic. For 2 years, large social gatherings
Oh,
were a no-no.
yes.
How was that?
Weird, weird. I've been doing this full time for I don't know how many years now. I started full time in 2004, and I'd done it 5 years before that as a volunteer. So I've been doing this broadly since about 1999, I think, around that time. Um, and for the first time in my life, I was a professional event organizer and not running any events. And there was certain existential moments of like, who am I and what on earth is my purpose? You know, I'm an event runner who doesn't run events. This is not a thing. Um, and so that was kind of weird. It was a sabbatical for 2 years where I didn't do my day job. And we tried to stay busy
Mm.
but it was tough. I probably only worked 20, 30, 40 hours a week. It was just was nothing. I would, yeah, I'm accustomed to much longer hours than that, and it was just strange. It was hard to find the motivation to work, but we were absolutely kind of supported by our player base. Um, we estimate they lent us effectively. They gave the company, if you calculate it, an interest-free loan of £250,000.
Wow.
That's what they did. So, why are profound decisions here today? Because our players said, we want this company. We do not want this company going bust under any circumstances whatsoever. We'll pay your wages, Matt. We'll pay all of your people's wages. Here's the money. You just pay us back when you're ready. No interest, nothing, no terms, just yeah. Now they did that because we sold them open
Mm-hmm.
tickets, which are tickets they could use further down the line. But effectively, they had to put all their trust in us. They had to give us our money at a time when no live role
Yeah.
playing could happen, no events could happen. We could have gone bankrupt and gone, sorry, we spent your money. Now that didn't happen. But nobody ever, people are just like, yeah, we understand we need to back this company or they won't make it. And weirdly, and I felt guilty because I watched some of my
Mm.
friends' businesses go under, and we were just kept. We weren't even financially difficult. It was not. Some people just gave us money, never mind loaned us money. They just said, no, just keep this money. I just want PD to have it, which was just. There are times when I think I don't know what we've done to deserve this kind of generosity and support. But people do love what we do, and they wanted to make sure it absolutely definitely happened. And we were able to keep everybody working for the company. Everybody was, kept on the payroll. We didn't have to lay anyone off. Even though we effectively, in
Mm.
theory, had no income for 2 years, and we just kept going, and we were able to use that time to work and do some significant
Mm.
stuff to improve the game. But it was weird, and there was a question all the
Yeah.
time of, is this ever coming back? You know? In the first year, it was kind of obvious there's not going to be any
Yeah.
LARP in 2020. And then we were like, oh, the vaccine, is 2021 going to happen? And then it was clear, no, no, it isn't. And actually, there was a big decision for us right at the end of 2021. And obviously, as a business, we want to be putting events on and selling tickets. But we looked at where the virus was, and we looked at our player base, and we looked at what they wanted, and we said, we don't think they want us to run an event yet. We don't think they're ready. People don't feel safe. They don't want this to happen. And we realized we could put an event on and half our players would come. And half our players would think, no, it's not safe to come yet. And effectively, the thing about our game is it's like a soap opera. People who come want to be at every event. And we thought we're going to force people to choose between being safe
Mm.
and the game they love. And we didn't want to do that. And we said, no, we're not going to run. So we could have run in 2021 and we took the decision not to right at the end of 2021, September. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll come back in 2022 because we don't want to force our players to pick between safety and their hobby. And that hurt financially, but it was so the right decision. And I think the reason we get such support from our players is because we try as a company to treat them with respect. You know, we try never to take the piss. We try to say, man, we're so grateful for what you do for us, so we will try and do as much for you.
I think to a certain extent, the live roleplay community is like that because, unlike many other fandoms, it's built around not just engaging with the source material, like watching the Star Wars films, but the community in the point of the event is for the community to come together and engage with each other, rather than just engaging with the material that you're creating. So there's a lot, obviously, there's a lot of game that happens on the field just between players that you haven't written, that is just emergent storytelling that the players build for themselves. And that obviously also creates substantial engagement because the players are bought into the relationships they've built up within the game.
Yeah, totally. There's a really strong sense of community about the game. Um, and that is essential to us. But it comes about, as you say, because we're all live role playing together. We're all interacting with each other. Nobody, you know, I don't know other hobbies well, but if I look at something like cosplay, effectively, you dress up as the character. You go to a convention, other people look at you and admire your costume and talk to you. But it's fundamentally a relationship between
Mm-hmm.
you and the source material, and then other people admire what you've done. I think, from my outside perspective, live role playing is not like that at all. We are inviting you to live in a world with 2,500 people for a weekend, 4 times a year. You're going to be in that world with those people. And it's effectively an entire, you're going to talk to them, interact with them, can fight with them, sing with them, eat and drink with them. And so there is a really strong sense of community. People know each other. Everybody knows someone who knows someone. You know, the degrees of interrelationship are very, very high. And and it's weird because I'm used to running a game where everybody knows me and I know everyone. And I used to try and know everyone who came to my games, and I can't do that now. But I still reckon I know someone who knows everyone who comes
Yeah.
to, everyone who comes to my game probably
Yeah.
knows someone who knows me. And that's really important to me to try and keep that because you need to get out there and chat to people and be part of the community because it's so important to what we do. It
So
is
how does
vital.
that scale? Because I know that you've had a massive influx of players since the end of the pandemic. This year has been your biggest yet.
It's been insane. The first event was sort of picked up where 2019 ended basically on 2,000 players. And then the next event was up 10%, and we were like, "Oh, this is our biggest event ever. This is amazing." And then the next event was 10% up on that, and that was our biggest event ever, and that was amazing. And now we look like this last event of the year, we're going to be 2,700, 2,750. It's up 10% again. It's starting to
Mm-hmm.
look exponential at this point, and it's just mad. My brain is going, I don't understand what is happening. And it is a challenge. Maintaining a community with that growth is a challenge. And we have to be realistic about it. We have to say, look, we are getting bigger and bigger. Part of it is about constantly trying to reinforce the social norms. I'm due to do a post shortly and say, look, remember people, no amplified music at the events. Remember the rules about this, remember the rules about that. It's about reinforcing the social contract and the
Yeah.
social norms of your community. It's about policing it rigorously. If there are people who are not, whose behavior is out of bounds and is not acceptable, then it's about finding them and saying, this is your one chance, buddy. Change your ways or you're out. Or if it's egregious, then we're like, no, sorry, you can't come again. Because as you grow, there are more and more people with a kind of Gaussian distribution of where they think acceptable behavior is. And so there's some long tails of people whose behavior is not acceptable. So, policing becomes a bigger factor. Um, and you do have to be realistic. The community changes. We're not a 300 or 400, 500 person LARP anymore, and we have to accept that. But it's about trying to find new ways for the community to express itself. The nations help very strongly. There's 300-400 players in the Navarre, and that creates a community within our game. Groups of players will have 20 or 30 in them, and that
Yeah.
creates a community, and then those communities come together. So what you don't have is, we're not 2,500
Yeah.
football fans at a game. There's communities within communities. It's all the way down, and I think that helps. And I'm sure it's like that in other pastimes as well. But really, it's just about trying to hang on to it for as long as possible and reinforce it and teach when people come in. The really positive thing actually is how the older community has reacted to the new people coming in. The one weakness of LARP is you can get a bit jaded. You've done this for 20 years, like, oh, right, it's a battle on Saturday, yeah, just like it was at the last 15 events I went to. There's a weakness that it all becomes a bit seen it, done it, and it's hard to constantly up the ante and make it surprising and new and novel. But new people come into LARP and they've just got wide eyes. They're like, I can't believe this world. I can wander around this world with 2,500 people in it. There's this entire settlement. And everywhere you go, there are people just role playing and interacting. Imagine like playing your classic online role playing game. And your character goes into the village, but there's the town, but there's 2,500 characters in the town. And every single one of them is a genuine, living, breathing person with their own agendas, their own interactions. They're not a scripted character. And you can just go anywhere freely and wander through that. People, when they experience that in the flesh for the first time, they're pretty wide-eyed. And actually, that makes the game better for everyone. That sense of awe and astonishment and wonder kind of rubs off on our older players, and it reminds us all why we love the hobby and why we're all so enthusiastic. And I genuinely think it's actually helped our community. It's really reinvigorated it and given it a sense of kind of, in fact, I was chatting to I got an email from one of my very, very, very old friends, old colleague of mine, who, like me, has been running LARP games for 30 years and absolutely would describe himself as a jaded curmudgeon of LARP. And he was like, I've genuinely been enjoying the games this year. It's been so nice to just be in a field with people who this is all so new and fresh, and to be in that world and reminded that, yes, this is incredible. It is amazing. It is astonishing.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's been good.
So let's talk about the future then, because obviously the event is going from strength to strength. What's the next stage for you? How do you support that user base and how do you improve the experience?
The big next stage for us is to try to buy our own site. It's a goal we want a permanent site for the games. At the moment, we're restricted by everything we can put up for a weekend and take down again at the end of the weekend. And we had a couple of temporary buildings on site, like a wooden Senate building and a wooden tavern, but they're very, very, they're designed that can just be taken down at a moment's notice. Because we have no planning, there's no permission for anything we're doing. It's all operating under 28-day rule, so it all has to go away at the end of the event. And for me, and also there's just restrictions, temporary roads made out of wood chip, poor quality drainage because, we're operating in farmers' fields. Everything we do is increasingly fighting the site. I did a talk a few years back and about sites in LARP and sort of said, the costumes are Game of Thrones standards. The good
Hmm.
costumes are movie set standards. They look amazing, but the sets are still pretty ropey. The sets are still like, tents are the best we can do, and we sort of pretend they're buildings and don't ask too many questions. Um, and I just think if we can get a permanent site, if we can buy a site and get the planning and create that, then we can start to create features on the site, buildings, a Senate building, a medieval tavern. We can put roads and paths in that are permanent so that we can improve the accessibility for people in wheelchairs and motorized scooters and mobility scooters and all that. Improve the toilets and make that side of it more accessible. And then just get better drainage and more cover if the weather turns bad. And but key. So there's a whole sort of out of
Yeah.
character, what a business might call hygiene factors that I really want to improve. But I want
Yeah.
Euro Disney. I want to be able to walk down the street and there are just
Hmm.
buildings and they're all perfectly in setting. The day I went to Paris Euro Disney, I just thought I want
Yeah.
this for my game. I want to walk down a street. I want there to be a giant fortress at the end, a tower 50 foot, 100 foot high. You can climb the stairs and look out on the balcony. I want those things for my game. And that to me is the next step. If we can create
Hmm.
that, if we can get that, that will take what we are
But that's
doing
not
to
just a
the
pipe
next
dream,
level.
though, is it? Because you are
And
actively working towards that.
Yes, yeah, we are. We've set a new company up, Unknown Worlds. Obviously, buying land is hugely expensive, and we need a lot of it, and more. We need more land by the day as our event grows. So we were like, okay, we're going to need £1.5 million, and we are probably one of the biggest LARP companies in the world. But LARP is a tiny hobby, so being one of the biggest LARP companies in the world is not. It's not, we're not some giant company. We can't just lay that money out. And also, we've spent 20 years investing every single
Hmm.
penny back into the game. So we got to where we are now. We're like, okay, the business is great, but we've no capital. So we said, okay, right, we've got serious about this now. We've got to do this. This has got to happen. It's the next step. So we set up a new company, Unknown Worlds, and we're basically trying to get investors, anyone who's a friend of mine, and basically saying, yeah, look, talk to us. And we are selling shares in the company, in the new company. And the idea is it will own the site. Um, and then it will rent the site to Profound Decisions to operate the events on. But the goal for me, if it just did Profound Decisions, that'd be amazing. It just did Empire, my game, that would be amazing. But it would only be half of what I want it to achieve. I really want to create like a national centre for the hobby. I want something that can make the whole LRP hobby, help it, develop and improve and make things easier for event organisers to create events. And yeah, I want the game, I want the hobby to improve. And I think, and that to me is the sort of that's the dream I'm trying to sell to my investors, and that's going really well. We're doing really, really well. Um, we're sort of, we're at very, very early doors. We only started selling shares, I think, about 10 days ago, but we've taken a lot of money
That's
already,
fantastic.
which is great. Um, yeah, so it's happening. It's really, really happening.
Hmm.
But it'll take a while. We've got to raise, I think our target is to raise £750,000 in share investment, which is, and all my investors going, what happens if we sell out? What happens if we sell out? And I'm like, hold your horses, guys. Got to sell a lot of shares. That's quite a target we're going to make. Let's not worry about if we do too well just yet. It'll be a nice problem to have, but
Yeah.
we're optimistic. It's looking good, but it'll be a long road. We've got to raise that money, and then we've got to get out there and find a site because we don't have a site yet. We need the money so that we can convince potential vendors, councils that all of this is
Yeah.
credible, that this is going to happen. I want to be able to go to sort of Derby or Leicester Council and say, I want to create a national centre. Here's my backing. Here's my funding. we're going to bring 30,000 visitors a year to your area. We're going to create a prestigious national
Yeah.
centre. Talk to me. But I need that financial backing. But that will take
Yeah.
time. It's not going to happen overnight. But it's really exciting. Really, really exciting.
Yeah, that sounds great. Just there's so many possibilities with having a permanent site in terms of how you break that up and whether you sorry, I'm getting distracted now about sort of like would you divide it into different areas of the site for different eras, or would you design all of the buildings to have replaceable fascias so that you can swap them out for different things? But that's stuff that you can build on once you have at the very least a site with nice clean shower block and toilets and roads and so on. The
Yeah.
the less exciting but more important stuff.
One of my project managers, Simon White, says, "Are you plumbing or castles? Are you the kind of investor that wants good toilets or you want a castle?" And we went around a dozen of our investors, and 11 people wanted plumbing, and one of them wanted a castle. It's like the balance of our investors is, I'd really like to have really nice toilets and showers, please. That would be my first
It's
priority. And our toilets set the standard for the hobby, but it's still a
yes,
festival. It's still in a field. So it is recirc toilets. It's not, they're clean, but they're not they're not like the toilets you have
yeah,
at home, which is what people want. But also, wouldn't it be amazing? A lot of people have dropped out of our hobby because they're
mm.
not able to camp anymore. It's just like, yeah, I love LARP, but camping, I can't bear it anymore. I would love to have chalets on site. I would love to be able to offer them
Yeah,
some very simple accommodation where, people can come to the event and be like, oh, I don't need to pitch a tent. There's a bed for
mm-hmm.
me. It's warm. It's dry. It isn't going to and the cold isn't going to bother my
Yeah,
sciatica or whatever. I can still play this LARP now. I'm 60 or 70 or 75 or 80. I
yeah.
really want to be able to deliver that. Yeah, but I also
Don't
want
we all?
castles. Yeah, don't we all? That is the thing to be excited about. How will we do it? I don't know. I'm lucky to have again, but just to have the support of the most amazing people. Just my basic thing that I bring to PD is that I'm persuasive enough to convince people who are vastly more talented than me to get behind me. That is my key ability. And we have folks like Bill
Mm-hmm.
Thomas who works on sets for us. And that guy worked on Harry Potter movies. He's worked on sets for Star Wars movies. We're talking about, the
Yeah,
best of the best people whose talents are just at that level. And they've got plans and ideas for how we'd lay the site out and sight lines,
mm-hmm.
and they understand these things. And I just nod and go, castles, right? We're going to be, um, I am the kid in the sweet shop, but better minds than me are thinking about those
Fantastic.
things.
So, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go to find out more
Mm.
about Profound Decisions and Empire Live Roleplay?
Our website, www.profouндecisions.co.uk. But honestly, if you just type Empire LARP into Google, you will find us very, very, very quickly. Or just type Profound Decisions into Google, up we will come. The website is your starting point. That is our little portal where you can create an account, make bookings. Basically, it's by the standards of the hobby, it's probably one of the best sites there is in terms of just being able to book and pay and everything else. There's a link from there to the wiki, and the wiki is gargantuan. Do not attempt to read it all. That will blow your mind. I think it's now 3 times the length of the Bible
Wow.
or something like that, or 10 times the length of War and Peace. It is vast. We add about 130,000 words every 6 weeks to the wiki, so you do not attempt to read it all. But it is basically, and it
Mm-hmm.
is our Wikipedia but instead of for the real world, it's for the setting. So treat it as a resource that you can look things up in
Yeah.
and find things out about the world, and skim it and look at the bits of it and think, oh, that looks cool, and then read a little bit more about that. And that's the way to sort of to use the wiki that we recommend. At least we do get the odd people who go, I've read every word, and I think you're
That's a lot.
mad. I haven't read every word of that wiki. It is huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, between those two. But then we also have the Facebook community. It really helps to sort of chat to other members of the community. You know, the best way to get into LARP is to chat to a couple of LARPers. There's an unofficial Discord, which is a little bit internety, but our Facebook community is very heavily moderated by us. So it's a really pleasant, welcoming environment. There's a special group just with new people. But basically, the hobby are generally our hobby used to be tiny and desperate for new players, and so the whole attitude of people in the game is welcome, come join us. You know, people are always really open and welcome to new people, because we all remember back when we were 12 people struggling to get a game together in our local club in a field, and we're not really there anymore, but we've still kept that very open attitude. But players can answer your questions better than I can. They will give you honest, you're like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. They're not good on the technical answers. If you've got like, well, how do I book, or, you know, what can I do? Then you can chat to us. But if you want to know about the game and, you know, how can I get involved and who can help me? And a lot of our players will lend costume and kit. They'll do anything to help people get in. It's incredible.
It's great. It's
really incredible.
It's a wonderful game. I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for joining me, Matt. If you've enjoyed listening to this chat about live roleplay game design, check out our back catalogue of podcasts. I've got interviews with Ziz Simons and Ian and Rachel Thomas back in history, talking about other live roleplay events, which you can dip into. You can find all of those at gamedev.london, along with links to our Discord community. Until next week, thank you.